Carolyn stepped onto the obstacle course, and the laughter hit her like a sudden storm. The wind whipped against her dark hair, pulled tightly into a braid, tugging at her uniform as if testing her focus before the trial had even begun. Around her, the elite SEAL trainees stretched and barked encouragement at each other. The scent of sweat and resin from the climbing ropes mingling in the cool morning air. Torque leaned against a metal rail, smirking, arms crossed over his broad chest. Hawk stood nearby, clipboard in hand, scanning the lineup with a practiced eye. Chief Instructor Bull watched silently from the far end, hands clasped behind his back, observing everything with unyielding scrutiny. "Ready to embarrass yourself, Viper?" Torque called, his voice carrying across the course. "Before we begin this mission, hit subscribe and ring the bell, because some stories of courage never made the headlines, but they deserve to be heard. Tell us where you're watching from, and who's the hero in your family." Kara didn't respond. She simply adjusted her gloves, flexed her fingers, and measured the distance to the first challenge, a 50-meter rope climb that had shattered dozens of previous attempts. She inhaled deeply, feeling the tension in her shoulders melt into focus. Her eyes flicked to the sprint segment next, a 200-meter dash with checkpoints timed down to the second. Every detail mattered. The friction of the rope, the wind gusting left to right, the exact moment the timer would start. Around her, the room was alive with chaos. Teams shouted strategy. Others argued over form and technique. Torque's laughter mingled with the others, a mocking rhythm that bounced off the concrete walls. Hawk barked a quick set of instructions, his voice cutting through the noise with surgical precision. Checkpoint 1, 30 seconds. Eyes sharp, Viper. This is not a courtesy run. Kara's call sign barely escaped her lips, but it was enough to acknowledge the world around her while staying centered. The record boards loomed at the far end of the course, numbers carved into steel, reflecting early sunlight. 142 seconds. 138, the fastest anyone had climbed and sprinted combined, an untouchable benchmark that most trainees didn't even dare approach. Kara's mind cataloged every metric, noting the rhythm of each step, the angle of the rope, the distribution of weight on her shoulders. She didn't need to look at Torque's sneer to know what he thought of her chances. When the horn sounded, she moved, rope under hands, feet finding their purchase with quiet precision. The other trainees strained beside her, muscles screaming in protest, while she climbed steadily, smooth, deliberate, almost serene. Torque's smirk faltered when he saw her pace, and a few heads turned, startled. Hawk's clipboard clicked as he marked her split times 50 meters, 48 seconds faster than anyone expected. Halfway through the sprint segment, Kara hit the ground and propelled herself forward with long, efficient strides. The wind tugged at her, whipping sweat into her eyes, but she didn't flinch. She timed her turns at each checkpoint, eyes scanning the markers, hands brushing the course tape precisely as she passed. The radio crackled. "This is Hawk, split time checkpoint 2. Her response was calm, barely a breath. "Viper, on track." Torque gritted his teeth, leaning into the sprint with brute force, but the results spoke for themselves. Kara hit the final line 22 seconds ahead of the expected split. Her first small Victoria-timed trial complete landed silently in the minds of her peers. A few glanced at each other, disbelief flickering across their faces. Bull's brow remained furrowed, assessing every microsecond. Yet even he couldn't hide the hint of acknowledgement in his stance. Kara slowed only after clearing the last marker, breathing controlled, eyes sweeping the course, as if already calculating the next challenge. Torque approached, feigning casual amusement, Mind if I give you a suggestion, Viper? Try something you'll regret. Let's see if all that calm doesn't crack under pressure." She didn't flinch. Instead, she studied him for a moment, noting his weight, the way he moved, predictable, ego-driven, overconfident. "I'll try," she said evenly, "but you might be the one regretting it." The small humor in her tone was lost on no one, and a ripple of quiet disbelief passed through the nearby trainees. Hawk made a sharp note on his clipboard, the numbers from her trial registering quickly. Doc scribbled in his notebook, observing more than commenting, a silent witness to Kara's focused presence. Bull's gaze never left her, evaluating how she balanced calm and calculation with speed. The course waited, each obstacle another test, every rope and sprint a measure of skill and nerve. Kara had entered to be tested, but she was already beginning to bend the rules of expectation around her own discipline and preparation. By the time the trainees regrouped, murmuring about her unusual efficiency, Kara had already moved on in her mind to the precision obstacle medal targets at 50 meters, each demanding both steady aim and speed. Torque's challenge hung in the air like a dare, but Kara didn't see it as a threat. She saw it as another calculation, another chance to prove that focus and skill could outweigh arrogance. She tightened her gloves, exhaled slowly, and approached the line with the same calm that had carried her through the rope climb and sprint. For the first time, the laughter that had greeted her arrival felt like fuel, not mockery. Every skeptical glance, every whispered bet against her ability only sharpened her awareness. Kara Lynn wasn't here to meet expectations. She was here to exceed them, quietly, relentlessly, and without apology. And as Torque gestured toward the next obstacle, a confident smirk still plastered across his face. Kara stepped forward and asked softly, "Would you mind if I tried?" Every laugh she'd heard now fueled the rhythm of her heartbeat. The sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the obstacle course as Kara Lynn tightened her gloves and scanned the next sequence of challenges. Rope rigs, shooting targets at 300 meters, and a narrow simulation lane designed for tactical infiltration stretched before her. The wind tugged at her uniform, a constant reminder that every decision, every adjustment, mattered. Torque stood at the far end, arms crossed, smirking as if daring her to falter. Hawk moved along the perimeter, clipboard in hand, eyes tracking every motion, noting every split second. Bull observed from the tower, silent but alert, measuring potential against performance. Kara's first move was deliberate. She approached the rope climb, estimating the sway caused by gusts of 5 to 8 miles per hour. Her hands found purchase quickly, fingers gripping the synthetic fibers with precise tension. Each pull was measured, each leg push calculated to conserve energy while gaining maximum height. Peers around her strained muscles taut, some losing rhythm, struggling to compensate for wind or exhaustion. Torque barked a laugh. "Come on, Viper. That's barely a warm-up." She didn't answer. Kara's focus was internal, the world outside reduced to timed markers and calculated arcs. She reached the top, noted the checkpoint 29 seconds, before swinging down with controlled momentum, landing perfectly in the sprint lane. Her stride was long, efficient, and relentless. She passed mock weapon stations, clearing each drill in order, simulated bolt-action rifles, timed reloads, and precision grips on handguns. Radio transmissions punctuated the effort. "This is Hawk, checkpoint 3, split time." "Viper on schedule," she replied, voice calm, nearly serene. The course demanded perfection. Every target mattered, every step carried consequence. Torque increased his pace, trying to outstrip her, throwing his weight into each move, but Kara's timing was flawless. She anticipated wind gusts, adjusted for rope swing, and measured distance with the precision of a seasoned sniper. Midway through the shooting segment, a rope snapped unexpectedly on the secondary climbing rig, sending a trainee tumbling into the safety mat below. The group froze for a split second. Kara adjusted instinctively, recalculating her approach. She gripped the adjacent rope, shifted weight, and completed the ascent with an improvised angle, landing ahead of schedule. The small improvisation didn't just save her time, it showcased a fluidity of thinking the others hadn't expected. Bull's eyes narrowed slightly in approval. Doc scribbled notes, recognizing the subtle brilliance in her method. Torque's smirk faltered. "You're a lucky viper," he muttered under his breath, but Kara didn't break rhythm. Every step, every target, every calculation was executed with quiet mastery. Peers, who had laughed earlier, now cast brief, astonished glances. Hawk clicked his pen, marking down her split times, every number faster than any predicted trajectory. Kara's focus never wavered, yet she noticed the subtle shift-respect building, grudging and unspoken, among the elite trainees. The radio crackled again. "This is Bull. Final timed run announced." Kara inhaled, letting the moment settle into her body. This was the point where preparation met risk, where skill could outshine arrogance. The precision targets stretched 300 meters across the open range, wind fluctuating between 2 and 5 miles per hour, demanding she compensate for drift and elevation. She studied the sight lines, calculated the arc for each shot, and visualized completion. The other trainees exchanged nervous looks, some tightening grips on ropes or weapons, aware that Kara's earlier improvisation had rewritten their expectations. She advanced into the simulated infiltration lane, moving like a shadow, low and controlled. Torque attempted to distract her with taunts, bumping into props, trying to rattle rhythm and concentration. Kara ignored him, fluidly navigating each barrier, correcting mid-step as needed. The radio squawked updates, and she acknowledged each in turn, maintaining communication while staying focused. Every motion was precise, economical, and deliberate. The final rope stretch loomed ahead. The last segment before the record attempt would be formally measured. Kara evaluated the angle, the grip, the flex of the fibers under tension. She ascended with a controlled, swinging momentum, adjusting each pull, each kick, to counteract the minor sway of the rig. The other trainees had slowed, some faltering mid-climb while she flowed past the endpoint, hitting the final checkpoint with a calculated grace. A murmur traveled through the group. Torque's jaw tightened, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Hawk's pen paused, mid-clicked. Bull's stance remained authoritative. But there was a shifter recognition of the skill that went beyond raw strength or arrogance. Even Doc looked up from his notebook, quietly acknowledging that Kara Lynn's performance had rewritten expectations for the day. Kara stood for a moment at the top of the lane, catching her breath, calm and unshaken, as if she had merely walked through a routine drill. She descended the final rope, landing lightly, and let her eyes sweep across the course. Every step, every calculation, every improvisation had been deliberate. The challenge had intensified, but she had risen to meet it. A subtle smile crossed her face, a recognition that this day was not about proving others wrong. It was about confirming what she already knew. Focus, skill, and resolve were unshakable forces. And as Bull's voice echoed across the course, announcing the official final run for the day, Kara Lynn stepped forward, ready to transform expectation into achievement. One clean breath, one silent nod. The impossible began. Kara Lynn stood at the starting line, eyes locked on the course ahead, measuring every rope, every sprint lane, every target. The morning sun cut harsh angles across the metal structures and climbing rigs, shadows stretching like silent spectators. Peers and instructors gathered along the perimeter, their faces taut with anticipation. Torque's usual smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped focus. Hawk tapped his clipboard nervously, tracking every split second. Bull stood behind them all, silent and commanding, waiting to mark the final official time. Kara moved first, stepping forward with precise timing. She gripped the rope of the initial 50-meter climb, calculating the sway against the 5 to 8 mile per hour wind. Every pull was controlled, each leg kick measured, conserving energy while maintaining speed. Her eyes flicked to the first checkpoint as she neared the top, noting the timer. 27 seconds. She landed cleanly and transitioned into the sprint segment with fluid motion, muscles coiled and releasing with perfect cadence. The radio crackled sharply. "This is Hawk. Split time, checkpoint 1. Viper on pace," she responded, calm, steady, letting the affirmation settle over the course like a quiet ripple of confidence. Torque pushed forward beside her, brute force and raw speed, trying to disrupt her rhythm. Kara adjusted with subtle shifts in stride, anticipating crosswinds, maintaining her trajectory, ignoring his presence entirely. Peers watched from the sidelines, their disbelief growing with each smooth, efficient motion. She approached the first weapon station, synthetic rifles lined up, targets at 300 meters. Kara's grip was perfect, eyes scanning for the minimal wind deviation. She fired each round deliberately, never rushed, tracking results through the scope, releasing each trigger with a precision that defied expectation. The radio responded, "This is Hawk, targets confirmed." She moved on to the second rope climb. Here, previous trainees had faltered, losing rhythm or balance in the gusts. Kara timed her ascent, adjusting for the subtle sway, landing at the top and swinging down with perfect control. Torque attempted to cut ahead, but misjudged the angle, losing a fraction of a second that Kara had gained with meticulous calculation. Hawk scribbled furiously. Bull's eyes narrowed slightly, acknowledging the rare display of both skill and composure. Next was the infiltration lane. Narrow passageways, low walls, and simulated obstacles demanded both speed and strategy. Kara flowed through the lane like a shadow, rolling under barriers, pivoting on precise points. Maintaining her alignment with the timer markers, each breath measured, every motion deliberate. Radio chatter tracked her progress. "This is Hawk, checkpoint 3. Viper remains within projected record parameters." A small group of trainees gasped as Kara vaulted over the final barrier and sprinted toward the last rope segment. Her body moved with refined efficiency, swinging up with controlled momentum. Every pull and kick calibrated to the sway of the rope. Torque's face fell as he realized she was ahead, executing each motion flawlessly, shaving seconds off the previous best. Hawk's pen hovered above the clipboard, pausing mid-recording. Even Doc watched from the sidelines, his notebook forgotten in awe. Kara reached the final platform, chest rising and falling in a controlled rhythm. She checked the timer, noting the split 15 seconds faster than the prior record for this segment. Her fingers tightened on the rope briefly before she released, landing lightly and taking a single step forward. Around her, a stunned silence had fallen over the course. The seals, who had doubted her competence now, exchanged incredulous looks. Torque swallowed hard, unable to maintain his earlier bravado. Hawk's eyes flicked to Bull, whose posture remained stoic, but the slight nod betrayed a recognition of Kara's achievement. She lowered her gloves and exhaled, letting the tension drain from her body, the course now behind her. The record boards awaited, but the numbers were already written in the minds of those who had witnessed. Bull's voice finally broke the quiet. Official time logged, record obliterated. Viper sets new benchmark. The words carried weight, reverberating through the gathered trainees. Sealing Kara's place in the unofficial history of the course, peers approached, tentative at first, then with firm handshakes and brief nods of respect. Torque's expression softened, admiration tempered with lingering competitiveness. Hawk scribbled final notes, acknowledging that the split times would redefine future expectations. Even Doc allowed himself a small, approving smile. Kara's eyes swept the course one last time, measuring the paths, the angles, the timing, not because she needed to, but because precision was ingrained, a silent testament to her skill and focus. As she stepped off the final landing, the sun striking her face, Kara felt the subtle weight of respect settling around her. The laughter and doubt that had met her arrival had dissolved into acknowledgement and quiet awe. The impossible had been achieved, not with showmanship, but with unflinching focus, preparation, and calculated execution. And as the seals gathered around to recognize her performance, Carolyn allowed herself a brief, satisfied smile. Already anticipating the next challenge,